Well, it would seem that I plucked a nerve. Josh and Brent from accounting seem extremely dedicated to their apathy and laziness, so you can continue finding links to Brony D&D videos post-Toon's ousting in the description, including the ones that have been posted since that video went up. The sole exception is the one summary video that has gone up, because that's what they should be doing instead of all this other stuff. Some people have accused me of just grinding an axe against Josh, but the fact of the matter is that I spent the last month explaining to Josh exactly how he could make this entire shitstorm go away and look like a golden boy for doing it. I've given him multiple opportunities to stick the landing, and he's just refused to take it. He'd rather clap his hands over his ears and pretend that nothing is wrong. Anyway, what I actually have to talk about today is only partially related to Brony D&D. I said in the last video that this kind of normalizing behavior has extremely bad consequences in a community that continues to have a rampant pedophilia problem. I said in Blame and Groom that Zach was not the first, and he certainly won't be the last. Meet Performance Major, one of the many people who crawled out of the woodwork to claim that Zach was being needlessly attacked and didn't deserve all this hatred. Unlike the others, however, oh, am I kidding? Exactly like the others, Performance Major is another pedophile. He's admitted to having cyber sex with minors. Oh, I'm sorry. ERP, which is totally different apparently, except it's not, it's exactly the same. Performance Major admitted to this in a video where he tries very hard to tug on the heartstrings of people who have actual working hearts and won't be suckered in by this bullshit, bringing up the cowardly suicide of Mark Salling, who was avoiding the consequences of possessing child pornography, trying to say that Hitler didn't deserve death, no, seriously, and waxing on about how we only have so much precious time on this earth.
Even someone as awful as Hitler, who was probably the worst human being in the world, who committed suicide, he didn't deserve it either.
You know, you would think that when you reach the point that you're showing sympathy to Hitler, that you would stop and think, am I the baddie? Anyway, Performance Major spent the majority of the video vilifying those who blew the lid on Toon's bullshit with a lot of claims about how, while it was wrong, we're all apparently blowing things out of proportion and going on a witch hunt and whining about how people disassociating from Zach was the worst thing ever, and talking about how having your friends ditch you hurts. This is actually a really popular rhetorical tactic among bronies of all stripes. When you do something stupid or shitty and you get rightfully eviscerated by the public for it, just rewrite the story to place focus on how much the consequences hurt you and casually leave out all the important details.
I may have not committed a crime, but I know what it's like to be disassociated with. I've been abandoned by several people in my life. Some closer, some not so close. Still hurts.
When Performance Major talks about how much being disassociated from hurts, he never once mentions what he did to cause people to disassociate from him. When Inkros went on homophobic rants because ships she didn't like kept appearing on her dashboard and she was met with a backlash, she wrote self-serving fanfiction about how people were hating her for having an opinion and casually leaving out what those opinions were. It's a rhetorical tactic that works because a lot of people in the community have just as bad priorities and will take greater offense to someone shutting down your opinions than someone actually being a fucking scumbag. Performance Major does a variation on what Dr. Wolf tried to do by appealing to sanctimony, only instead of telling victims to forgive and then feeding them bullshit about what forgiveness is, Performance Major is just playing up how bad Zach supposedly feels and how the last thing he needs is to be abandoned, despite his being abandoned being a direct result of his predatory behavior. You remember how I said the brony community actively shields people from consequences for their actions? This is how they do it, by painting the people who have become the consequences as the real people at fault. Anyway, Performance Major then admits to sexting minors. This is the crown jewel of the piece because almost every single fucking excuse you could imagine comes out in sequence. Arguing mature enough over the person's real age?
I roleplay with just about anyone who's willing. And sometimes, if the minor is mature enough, I'll roleplay with them too.
Arguing that roleplay is different from cybersex despite laws regulating sexting making no such distinction?
It's roleplay. It doesn't mean anything. And if it does, then that's sad.
Blaming the victim despite the fact that sexting a minor is a one-way crime to which the minor is not guilty of any wrongdoing and completely ignoring the power dynamics that Zach so thoroughly exploited?
But I happened to realize that the one girl didn't discourage Toon. So you know what? She's just as guilty.
Going on about how being subjected to consequences has ruined his life and completely ignoring the fact that he ruined his life through his own actions?
No one should see a fucking private Skype call. I don't know how someone got it, but someone got it and it ruined Toon's life.
It's like a really depressing game of bingo, you guys. He even tries to paint the leaking of the original Skype call as some kind of betrayal, despite that being the only instance where Zach's friends didn't fuck this up royally. You can see how quickly he devolves into shaming others for actually warning people that there was a predator in their midst. And I can see why he would, because if that previous diatribe is anything to go by, Performance Major seems to be completely unaware that he or Zach have done anything wrong. He's operating under the delusion that role-playing is different from sexting someone, even though it isn't. The brony community is filled with nonsensical bullshit rhetoric like this. They think if they meet certain specifications, then their actions are neither illegal nor unethical. None of their exceptions hold up in any sort of legal sense. They just imagine that it does and never do any research whatsoever. And when you confront people with that information, they change the subject to be about what's really damaging to minors. I'll spare you the rest of Performance Major's bullshit because this is already going on rather long, but suffice to say, every single fucking distraction tactic comes out, including trying to accuse everyone who lambasted the fucking sleazebag of trying to get famous, even though everyone who did had a higher subscriber count than Zach, and proceeding to try and slander the one victim who came forward, basically crying fake news at everything he possibly can. You can find his entire diatribe in the description below if you're that desperate to see it. Performance Major has to make these excuses because without them he might have to contend with the fact that he's also done something wrong. The Brony community has long been a safe haven for pedophiles because they come armed with excuses and delusional exceptions to their actions, and no shortage of buzzwords to throw at anyone who might contradict them. But sexting a minor, roleplay or not, is pedophilia no matter what you say. People who make these same kind of excuses to defend Zach are enabling him no matter what you say. Trying to argue in favor of forgiveness without atonement is gaslighting no matter what you say, and refusing to properly deplatform a pedophile is contributing to the empowerment of all of the above no matter what you say. And if any of the above applies to you, you have only yourself to blame when you get eviscerated by the public. If you're sick of being vilified for these things, stop fucking doing them! It's really not that fucking hard! Oh, and by the way, any of you out there who might have projects in the works that feature Performance Major, it's highly recommended you don't make the same mistake that Brony D&D did. I'll see you next time.